Boldwood presents Summer in Andalucia, written by Lucy Coleman and read by Lucy Scott. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. 2018. January. Chapter 1. Gastro Heaven. As I push open the door to what is the #1 restaurant on everyone's radar at the moment, Aleatory, I can't believe how lucky I am. Opportunities like this are rare, and for some reason, fate picked me. I was in the right place at the right time, having recently become a feature writer for the popular upscale dining magazine. All eyes are now on me to show everyone I have what it takes to get the story behind the headlines. It's been 9 months to the day since Aleatory opened in Piccadilly, where the restaurant faces onto the magnificent Green Park, and there is a 5-month wait to get a reservation. Virtually overnight, being able to say you've dined here has become a status symbol, and #Aleatory has been trending on Twitter at least once a week for months. It's crazy. So the pressure is really on me to deliver. Our readers will expect an article that won't just make their mouths water over the culinary delights on offer, but also shed some light on a new rising star who hasn't just stepped but leapt into the limelight. Jaws dropped when word got out that chef Rick Oliver and pop icon Kathy Clarkson were joining forces to set up a stylish new restaurant. And now I'm here, nervously excited about what is the biggest interview of my career so far. Inside, although the lights are on, there is no one in sight. But before we reach the smart glass reception desk, a waiter comes striding towards us. "Good morning. How can I help? I'm afraid the restaurant doesn't open until noon if you have a reservation." The tall, smiley-faced young man is welcoming, but apologetic. "I'm Lainey Summers, and this is my colleague, Anthony Preston. We're here to interview Rick Oliver." I have no idea why this comes out sounding like a question, as if he'll check the diary and send us away like two imposters. "Oh, of course, I'm so sorry, but Kathy and Chef are in a meeting right now. I will, however, let them know that you have arrived." There's a loud crash in the background, and both Ant and I wince, but the waiter's face remains immobile, as if the noise didn't register at all. The sound of escalating voices indicates that all is not well in the kitchen, and we find ourselves following our guide as he leads us off in the opposite direction. The waiter seems totally unfazed by what sounds like a full-blown argument taking a turn for the worse as the volume increases. "If you'd like to make yourself comfortable in the lounge area," he continues, indicating with his hand, "can I bring you a cup of tea or coffee?" "Coffee would be nice, thank you," Ant replies, and I nod my head. "Two it is, then." The young man smiles politely before hurrying away, seemingly still oblivious to the commotion going on in the background. We stroll past an impressive floor-to-ceiling wine rack which serves as a screen, partially obscuring the main body of the restaurant. "I wonder what that's all about. Clearly someone isn't having the best start to their day," Ant whispers as soon as we're alone. "Indeed, it seems we might have arrived at an inopportune moment. I hope it doesn't affect the interview." "Maybe the rumours are true, after all," he replies, raising his eyebrows. Rick Oliver became a name to watch, working as the sous chef to the revered chef de cuisine Martin Alvarez at the Food Haven. During his 4 years working at the infamous restaurant, it went from 1 Michelin star to 3, which was a phenomenal achievement. But then, one day, there was an almighty row, and Rick walked out. The rumours spread like wildfire in the industry, and a scandal like that could kill someone's career overnight. The big question was whether Rick was, in fact, sacked. Martin sat back, seeming to gloat over the speculation, but naturally, Rick was keen to limit the damage in any way he could. All eyes were on him, wondering what he would do next. Finding himself a backer and setting up his own restaurant was a bold and daring move, to say the least. But he has turned into a trailblazer. "They've done a brilliant job of designing the restaurant, and this refit must have cost a small fortune." Ant is right. Everything is sleek and uncluttered, and the bar itself is glossy white marble, accented with mirrors and soft lighting. The lounge has a contemporary feel, with a variety of designer armchairs in electrifying colours. It reminds me of a tropical rainforest in bloom. There are vibrant shades of green and little pops of vivid colour that jump out like exotic flowers. Ant deposits his black holdall discreetly behind one of the chairs before settling himself down, and I suppress a grin. It's the sort of environment where anything out of place immediately looks like clutter. It's very artsy, Ant continues, as I sink down in a lime green chair shaped like a huge leaf. I tuck my work bag in neatly alongside me and then pull out my compact, tidying a few stray hairs that have escaped my ponytail. Wearing a new pale grey trouser suit, at least I look and feel the part, even though my nerves are jangling. However, being here with Ant, who is the magazine's #1 photographer, I know we make a great team, and this article is going to really grab the reader's attention. So, it's time to take a deep breath and compose myself. I'm sure that's Kathy's influence, I reply. Her videos are always eye-popping, colourful and different. Actually, this chair is more comfortable than it looks. Sinking back, my fingers instinctively run over the basket weave fabric. I've done my homework and read everything I can get my hands on about Kathy and Rick, but what interests me most is how their paths crossed and what inspired their partnership. Whether that will come out in the interview, though, I have no idea. Scanning around, I notice that in the restaurant there are an increasing number of staff toing and froing. I can't help wondering whether they are all desperate to distance themselves from whatever is happening in the kitchen or merely getting ready for opening. It's no longer possible to hear raised voices, but then again, we're a fair distance away. Ant leans forward. Do you think they've forgotten about the interview? I shrug my shoulders, glancing across to see our waiter heading in our direction. He's sporting a big smile, which seems genuine enough, as he places a loaded tray down on the table in front of us. Kathy apologises for the wait and will be with you as soon as possible. In the meantime, she would love for you to sample some new items that are on today's dessert menu. We have pink champagne cake with a candy floss cloud, butter cake with a pistachio and rose crumble topping, and a chocolate truffle infused with citrus sherbet gin. Enjoy. It looks amazing, but it's Rick we're really here to interview, and if he's not available, then we're wasting our time. I wonder if the cake is a peace offering to soften us up with a quick sugar fix, but I'm not going to say no. Sampling a wide variety of amazing dishes is part of my job, but the restaurants aren't always as upmarket and expensive as this one. It would have to be a special occasion indeed for me to come and eat here if I was paying for the meal. Wow, Ant remarks, as we both scoot forwards on our chairs to eagerly grab one of the small forks. They're so beautiful, it's almost a pity to tuck in and spoil them, I remark, dithering over what to taste first. Stop! Ant yells, and I freeze. The fork in my hand is just inches away from one of the 3-inch square cakes sitting on the narrow slate platter. Ant jumps up to grab his camera and, seconds later, begins clicking away. He indicates for me to pose, and I put on my photo face. That was meant for tasting, not photographing. I immediately look up to see the smiling face of Kathy Clarkson, this year's veritable queen of pop and a Grammy Award winner. She's every bit as glamorous up close as she is whenever I've seen photos of her. Every time I turn on the radio, I swear that within 5 minutes they air one of her tracks. Standing up to hold out my hand, we shake, and her grasp is firm. It's lovely to meet you, Kathy. I'm Elaine, but everyone calls me Lainey, and this is Ant. Thank you for coming, guys. It's much appreciated. We're thrilled to be appearing in the magazine, she remarks, as she turns to look at Ant. As you can see, I continue, Ant hasn't given me permission to get to the tasting yet, but the presentation alone is stunning. Kathy smiles appreciatively as her intriguing pale blue eyes sweep over me. Has she come to break the news that we're going to have to reschedule the interview, I wonder? Our attentive waiter hurries across to pull up a chair for Kathy, while Ant settles himself back down. Having gotten his shots, he will be eager to tuck in. Rick is a perfectionist, of course, Kathy replies, taking a seat. We had an accident with the candy floss cloud and hell broke loose, so I apologise for the explosion just now. I'm afraid this business is still all rather new to me, and I had no idea how fraught things can become in the kitchen. That's quite a statement to make in front of a journalist you've never met before. Cathy's obviously keen to make it clear that the ruckus is nothing to do with her, but I'm shocked by her candour. "I don't think fraught is quite the right word," Rick corrects her as he approaches, and Cathy half turns to acknowledge him. I'm looking at the back of her head now, so I can't see her expression, but I can tell by his grin he's teasing her. The first thing that comes to mind seeing them together is what a handsome couple they make. Cathy is stunning, of course, but up close, Rick too has a charming, almost magnetic quality. He's handsome, with short dark hair that is a little longer on the top, but not overtly fashionable, just practical. Rick doesn't strike me as the sort of man who spends hours looking in the mirror. Rather, he comes across as genuine and instantly likeable. When he looks directly at me, there's an intensity, and yet I also sense a little humour, and maybe a hint of reserve, which I hadn't expected, unless he's feeling embarrassed and realises we haven't had the best start to an interview. Rick reaches out to drag a chair across to join us, and we briefly shake hands as we make our introductions. He has certainly recovered well after what sounded like quite an explosive episode, as now he looks relaxed. But when Cathy turns back around, I notice she's frowning. "Well, let's say how hot it gets in the kitchen at times," she corrects herself, labouring the point as she stares at him. Then she turns to look at me. "The proof is in the eating, of course." Is there a frosty edge to her voice, or am I imagining it? They are now both looking at me in fervent anticipation, but I hesitate for a second to marvel over the attention to detail. The dessert is perfection on a plate. I tentatively dig my fork into the delicate pink nest sitting on top of an even paler pink sponge base. The cake stands just over 3 inches high, and, miraculously, I manage to extract a thin sliver without totally wrecking it. Nervous tension makes my hand waver a little as I guide the fork back to my mouth. They are all watching me intently, and Ant looks decidedly nervous, making no attempt to follow my lead. Then the taste explosion hits me. You paused for a moment there before you took a bite, which for me means we did a good job. How the dish is presented is the first part of the culinary experience, and now, what are you picking up? Tell me. Rick Oliver's voice is demanding, as his eyes search my face. His mood has changed, and his brow furrows into a deep frown. Strawberry, bubblegum, and crystallized pear? My voice rises with incredulity, and he laughs. Spot on. I told you, Cathy. Discerning diners will be able to differentiate each of the flavours, and that's why we need to sneak in the little surprises. One glance in Cathy's direction, and I know I've said the wrong thing. When her smile slips for a moment or two, what I see on the face of the music industry's sweetheart is annoyance. It's clear that she is a very hands-on partner, and not just an investor, even though her background is far removed from the food industry. The restaurant has gained a following in record time, not least, I'm sure, because some of the diners come in the hope of catching sight of her. But the memories diners leave with are all about the food. And surely that's down to Rick and his team, including sous chef Pierre Verbier. But the relationship between Cathy and Rick seems more complicated. Perhaps the rumours of a romance are true, because she's sporting a huge engagement ring. Yes, well, let's agree to disagree about the bubblegum flavour, shall we? Right, I have some urgent calls to make, but once you are all set up for the formal photographs, please send someone to find me. I'll leave you in Rick's hands until then. Her tone is curt, and there's a residual moment of awkwardness as she disappears out of earshot. Clearly, while Cathy might not want to answer any questions, her business head is telling her the smart thing is to make sure her face appears in the spread. I forage around in my bag, pulling out a notepad, pen and phone, placing them on the coffee table in front of me. Rick, is it okay for you if I make a few notes as we talk? And would you be comfortable if I also use a recording app? The important thing now is that I make him feel at ease. Our email exchanges leading up to today have been extremely encouraging and chatty, so I'm not anticipating any problems. As long as you don't ask any questions I don't want to answer, it's fine by me. But first, Your tasting session isn't over, he replies. It's obvious from the way he flashes his eyes at me that it's food first, always. I glance at Ant, who immediately begins tucking in. He'll eat anything. But as for appreciating the finer details, he's no gastronome. I'm interested to see what you think of the butter cake, Rick says. I stoop forward to rescue a forkful after Ant has succeeded in decimating the perfect little tower. Popping it into my mouth, I close my eyes for a moment, and when I open them, Rick is again watching with interest. Both Ant's bio and mine were in the pre-interview pack. In my case, after freelancing for several newspapers around the country, writing independent reviews for local restaurants, I gained a following. Now I have a dream job. I'm here today because I have a reputation for picking up on even the subtlest of flavours. There is a bit of a frustrated chef inside of me, but sadly, my talents lie elsewhere. I might not be able to conjure up a truly memorable plate of food, but my taste buds don't lie, and my skill is in sharing the experience with my readers. If I'm not mistaken, Rick looks like he's actually holding his breath. Smooth, buttery, and the crunch of the pistachios is a wonderful contrast, but... oh, that hint of rose. It lingers on the tongue. Wonderful. Rick sits back in his chair, beaming, and I look at him, a tad embarrassed. We turn to stare down at the platter at the chocolate truffle, which is now merely crumbs. I look at Ant. Best truffle I've ever had, he replies, and both Rick and I begin to laugh. While I might not have made the best first impression with Kathy, Rick Oliver is turning out to be a pleasant surprise. He is, without a doubt, a daunting presence in the kitchen, but with great skill and talent comes great passion, and you can tell immediately that he has plenty of that. I don't think I can recall ever meeting a man where two words instantly jumped into my head like they did with Rick: enthralling and dynamic. With him, you simply know you are in the presence of someone remarkable. Hey, Dad. How you doing? I'm good, Lainey. What's happening with you? Problems? There's no fooling Dad. Having spent most of his career working as an investigative journalist, even when he can't read my body language, he immediately picks up on the tone of my voice. And my tone tonight is, sadly, a tad deflated. I settle back against the cushions and draw my legs up onto the sofa. I have a dilemma. I've been asked to cut a few things from an article I wrote last week about a smart new restaurant that is the place to go right now. If you can succeed in getting a reservation, that is. There's an ominous silence before he clears his throat. Asked or told? Yes, well, it was presented as a suggestion, but I did a little nosing around and my boss's assistant confirmed my suspicions. There was a closed-door telephone conversation with the agent of one of the two people I interviewed. Ah, bit of a delicate situation, is it? Dad knows all about that. Being labelled a whistleblower shut a lot of doors for him. Now he writes fiction for a living, and his days are spent creating and solving crimes. How close they come to mirroring reality, I dread to think. However, he's at a point in his life now where he can be prosaic about the price he paid and grateful to have moved on. Dad has a growing fan base who appreciate the realism in his stories, and that has done wonders to lift him out of the depression that claimed him for a while. But he'll never get over the way people he considered to be staunch friends and long-term colleagues rushed to distance themselves from him when he wrote his exposé of a scandalous cover-up. The fallout was ugly at the time, but he refused to be part of a scam, and that took courage. It's not exactly contentious, I explain. I simply aired a few truths. It's a fabulous restaurant with amazing food, but the two partners have an unusual and somewhat volatile relationship. There were a couple of explosive conversations going on in the kitchen when Ant and I first arrived. I hung around outside the next day and managed to bump into one of the waiters. It was obvious he had something he wanted to say, as he accepted my offer of grabbing a quick coffee together. He was naturally a little guarded, but apparently a pan was thrown across the kitchen, and it wasn't the first time. Who did the throwing? I can't say for sure, but he did tell me that the chef's business partner had a meltdown and the kitchen staff couldn't get out of there quickly enough. All of this was going on in the background as Ant and I were waiting to begin the interview. I didn't put any of that in the article, of course, But our readers are interested in the dynamics between this power couple, as she's a big name in the music industry. Ah, and you gave a little insight into that? I was only repeating the words that came out of her mouth. This is a couple who don't see eye to eye on everything, and she's no silent partner, I can tell you that for a fact, as I saw her in action. I was diplomatic naturally, but if I cut out all references to her, then it's just an ad for the restaurant, and the readers are going to wonder why I've skipped over the obvious questions on everyone's lips. Dad sighs. Compromise is never easy, Lainey, especially when you sniff out a story, like a subplot going on behind the scenes. But my advice is to stick to the remit, bearing in mind that it's a food magazine and the fact that you're still very new there. I guess he's right. Having started my career as a freelance reporter for several local newspapers, I'm probably too used to everything being about getting a lead and jumping on it to see what I can dig up. Old habits are hard to shift. You know me, Dad. I try to see things through the eyes of my readers and answer the questions I think will be in the forefront of their minds. It's a good article, and Aunt did an amazing job of the photo spread, but it rankles with me to gloss over the human element of the story. I mean, they are a dynamic duo, but sparks are flying, and that might be the reason why the restaurant is so successful. I could be the first one to put that into print. Dad lets out a loud, as he mulls it over. Whether it's a favour being asked of someone at the top, or concerns about being sued if a complaint is filed, you've obviously touched a raw nerve somewhere, my darling. I'm not saying there aren't times when it's worth sticking your neck out, as that would make me a hypocrite, wouldn't it? But as tempting as it might be to say it as it is, my advice is that you choose your battles. And is this one really worth it? You aren't writing for a celebrity gossip magazine, are you? And perhaps that's the point your editor is trying to make. But I was shocked at the difference between the sweet public persona of a well-known icon and the sharp businesswoman I glimpsed that day. It's not unheard of for a chef to throw a wobbly, as they're all perfectionists, but she's even opinionated about the food. And the truth is that the chef was noticeably different when she joined us for the photographic session at the end of the interview. A little laugh echoes down the phone line. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, Lainey, does it? No one is going to tell you what to write, but look, have you considered that you might have caught her on a bad day? If she's popular, then I seriously doubt that she spends much of her time there anyway. Just grab a coffee, sit down quietly, and go through your article line by line. Switch off and focus on the words. Your instincts will tell you what to do now that you know there might be one or two things that come across as a little contentious or superfluous, dare I say. Does a row or two in the kitchen spoil the gastronomic experience for the diners? Who knows what goes on behind the scenes in any restaurant, and if the food is good, surely that's your story in a nutshell. Dad is right, of course, and I have the distinct feeling that he was being diplomatic when he used the word superfluous, because I think what he wanted to say was judgmental. I hear what you're saying, but won't people wonder why I didn't see the obvious power dynamics if I totally ignore what is a huge and potentially destabilizing factor in this unusual relationship? Read it through again. And if you still feel the same way, then resubmit it and see what happens. The decision may well be made for you anyway. You know how it is. And if that's the case, then take it on the chin. It's not worth making waves so early on when this job is perfect for you. You're a foodie at heart, and your reviews inspire people who appreciate the way you were able to deconstruct flavours and verbalise taste sensations. If readers can't visit the restaurant in person, it might encourage them to experiment with a new combination of flavours at home. That's where your focus lies now, so don't forget that. Oh, Dad, why do I have this need to always tell the truth, warts and all, as Mum would say? To me, leaving something out feels as bad as telling a lie. Because that's the way we brought you up, Lainey. But the world is changing, and it doesn't hurt to stand back at times and consider what's best for you in your situation. I ploughed forward to fight for something I believed in, and it ended up turning our lives upside down. And that's something I will always regret. Oh, Dad, please don't feel bad. I'm proud of you, and we got through it. And I think being an author suits you. Right. I'll make myself a strong coffee and then look at the bigger picture. Dad gives a throaty little laugh. He knows this decision could go either way. Talking of your mother, have you checked on her lately? No. We talk probably once a month, but getting to grips with a new job means that life's been hectic. His silence feels like an accusation. I know, I blurt out. It's just an excuse, but I still struggle to accept Mum's decision, after the divorce, to run off to France so she could follow her dream. I want her to be happy, of course I do. But I know you still love her. Clearing his throat, Dad's tone is firm. Let's not go there now, Lainey. Besides, she didn't run off. She's free to do exactly as she pleases. It was all my fault. Just don't forget that your mum's been through hell and she deserves a quiet, happy life. Don't make her feel guilty about that. What I admire most about Dad is that even though life will never be quite the same again for him, he can still stand back and apply that logical common sense of his. His heart might be broken, but he doesn't blame Mum for that. He blames himself. And in a way, he's right. But how was he to know things would go the way they did? Point taken. I'll try harder, I promise. We'll speak soon, Dad. Love you. As the phone line disconnects, a sense of emptiness washes over me. Or is it a niggling resentment for what happened to my parents? When two people are right for each other, it's tantamount to a crime to let other people cause so much havoc that it tears them apart. And I still can't let that thought go. Chapter 2. No one is perfect. Is that Lainey? The voice on the other end of the line is faint, and I put a finger in my left ear to block out the background noise in the office. Yes, Lainey Summers, how can I help? It's Rick Oliver. I was wondering if you'd written up the interview yet. Do we get to see it before it's published? It's in next month's issue, isn't it? Oh, hi, Rick. It's due for publication on the 28th of next month. Is there a problem? I skip over his question, hoping he'll get straight to the point. No, not really. I was just wondering if you could spare me half an hour. I'm in a coffee shop around the corner from your offices as we speak. Butler's, do you know it? Intriguing. Yes, I do. Okay, give me 5 minutes and I'll join you. Thank you, appreciated. See you soon. Clearly, he's on his way to the restaurant, but he's taking a detour for a reason. Grabbing my coat and bag, I shovel in my phone, iPad, and a notebook before I head out. I have an unscheduled appointment with Rick Oliver, I informed Sally on reception. It shouldn't take long, and I'll be back in time for the staff meeting. Lucky you, she replies, grinning at me. I hear he's a bit of a charmer. Can't wait to read your article. Seems he can't wait either. I mutter under my breath as I walk briskly across the foyer and head out into the fresh air. Having taken the decision to make a few little tweaks to the article, I resubmitted it and have heard nothing further. I'm hoping the reservations had been about an overzealous use of a couple of forthright adjectives, which, when softened, made the references less contentious. One of them being the word powerful and the other controlling. After 2 strong cups of coffee, I decided that Dad was right, and I was being a little harsh. On reflection, the words proactive and enthusiastic put a more positive spin on Kathy's behaviour. As I scurry away from the office deep in thought, I almost collide with someone as they step directly in front of me, bringing me to a sudden halt. It was crowded in the coffee shop, so I thought we could stroll over to the square and enjoy a takeaway. I make an effort to hide my surprise as Rick Oliver looks at me with a half grin on his face, holding up 2 reusable coffee cups. I try to avoid plastic and cardboard if possible, so you can choose your colour. He's clearly hoping I'll choose the purple one, as he's holding the blue one closer to his chest. I take it, giving him a brief smile and wondering what on earth he's after. Thanks, that's kind of you, Rick. It occurs to me that I could invite him back to the office, but it's open plan and we hot desk. Today also happens to be the monthly meet-up, where ideas for future features get kicked around and the gathering beforehand can get a little noisy. The square it is, then. What a coincidence you called me on a day I happened to be in the office, I muse suspiciously. He turns to look at me, his face reflecting unease. The truth is, I had a tip-off. Look, let's grab a quiet seat somewhere and I'll tell you exactly why I'm here. Dodging in between the stream of pedestrians heading in both directions, we cross the road and make our way to what the locals affectionately call the garden. It's a small, gated area with a dozen towering trees and a swathe of grass and a couple of borders dotted with rose bushes. It's a place where office workers come to sit and while away their lunch breaks on sunny days. But at 10 o'clock in the morning, there are only a handful of people strolling around. "Let's sit here," I suggest, as I settle myself down on the nearest empty bench. "I can only spare half an hour before I have to head back for a meeting, I'm afraid. You were lucky to catch me." His visit has rather caught me off guard, and he doesn't seem to be in a hurry. I don't really know how to react, as his behaviour is bizarre. Rick sits down, places his coffee on the bench next to him, and immediately jumps back up again to forage around in his pocket. He produces a handful of little packets of brown sugar. "No stirrer?" I inquired. He looks at me, apologetically, shrugging his shoulders. "Sorry, it's fine. I'm trying to cut out my measly 1 spoonful anyway. Right, what's on your mind?" He lowers himself back down onto the seat, and I watch as he takes the lid off his coffee and empties in 4 packets of sugar. He places the lid back on, giving it a cautious swirl, and then sets it back down in the space between us. In the meantime, I'm happily sipping away and thinking that the jump from 1 sugar to none isn't quite as awful as I'd thought. Staring at him pointedly, I raise my eyebrows, implying that he'd better get on with it, because the clock is ticking. "I can't even begin to imagine what impression you walked away with that day you came to the restaurant, and I hope I'm in time to explain before you go to print." He glances at me, awaiting my response, but I continue sipping my coffee for a moment, considering how honest I should be with him. "Someone has already been in touch with my boss, no doubt calling in a favour," I inform him, and I'm hoping he can see from my expression that this hasn't gone down well with me. Please believe me when I say I didn't know that. It was probably Kathy's agent. He wasn't aware that she was going to be a part of the interview, and now he's getting anxious about it. She's in Los Angeles at the moment, but he quizzed me about it, and given what happened, he suggested I come to see you to set the record straight. I agreed to do that, even though I told him straight that Kathy wasn't supposed to be there anyway. She was the one who insisted on talking to you after the photo session. Kathy isn't... she isn't... The pause goes on for several seconds, and I look at him questioningly. The truth is that she'd been up all night at the studios filming her latest music video and came straight to the restaurant afterwards. In hindsight, she admits that was a huge mistake. Kathy has learnt the hard way that what gets into print isn't always accurate. Not that I'm implying what you write wouldn't be fair. He hurries to reassure me. I stop him there. My article is based on the time I spent at the restaurant and our conversations. It's as simple as that. I try my best to sound neutral and ignore his implication that I might have another agenda, because I don't. "Please let me explain," he continues. "You arrived at the precise moment that we were in the kitchen rowing, and the timing was obviously very unfortunate. It took a while for both of us to cool off, so we were edgy. What I'm here to ask is that you recognise it had nothing at all to do with the restaurant. It's a huge investment for us both, and I know all eyes are on us." He sounds and looks pretty convincing, as if he's speaking from the heart. I'm well aware that it's risky utilising Kathy's fame to gain exposure for the business, whilst trying to keep our relationship out of the public eye. Naturally, I spotted the engagement ring that Kathy was wearing, I confirm. I can assure you, though, that has nothing at all to do with my article. He rolls his eyes. I wasn't even aware that she was wearing it that day. I'm sure she meant to take it off. We argued over the stupidest of things because Kathy was dog-tired and I was stressed. It was one of those days, that's all. He lapses into silence. "Ah, the bubblegum flavour," I reply, and he shrugs his shoulders, a hint of amusement lighting up his eyes. "Yeah, she was so tired it tipped her over the edge. Look, I want to be straight with you here. Everything with the restaurant is going brilliantly at the moment. It's almost too good to be true. When Kathy commits to something, she does it wholeheartedly, not just financially. She likes to be hands-on, and everything I have is on the line too," he admits with a grimace. "Kathy is probably the only woman I've met who understands that, with me, work comes first every time, because it mirrors her own life. We're keeping the engagement secret because she doesn't want it overshadowing what she sees as my success. But it's our success, really, because I couldn't have done it without her. Aside from what the public see, behind the scenes she is a strong, determined woman with enormous drive, but there is also a softer side to her that goes unseen." He stops to pick up his coffee, taking a sip and making a face before swirling it around yet again. I have a sweet tooth, he admits, grimacing as the second mouthful doesn't appear to taste much better. I know it's a big ask, but if the interview has been scheduled for another day, we wouldn't even be having this conversation, I promise you. Scanning his face, he looks tired and concerned. So what are you asking of me? He swallows hard, taking a deep breath in through his nose as if to bolster his confidence. It would be better if the article didn't feature Kathy, other than to loosely mention that we are in partnership together. And obviously, any photographs you use featuring her will benefit both the magazine and the restaurant because she's hot news right now. I'm not trying to gloss over anything, but in terms of running the restaurant, Kathy is rarely around, and after a few hours' sleep, she was mortified about the impression you must have left with. Was she? I wonder. But the look on his face seems sincere as I mull over his words. After all, it's all about the food, and that was good, wasn't it? He asks, as if he isn't sure what my answer will be. It wasn't just good. It was amazing, Rick. Okay, I'll take out any reference to Kathy in the article, but we'll credit her as your business partner in the photo spread. It can't be easy, living one's life in the limelight, I suppose. That's the problem with publicity. It isn't always positive, and it isn't always within a person's control. However, it would be unfair of me to make assumptions based on catching someone on a bad day, because we all have them. The fact that Rick came here of his own accord and Kathy didn't send him makes me even more inclined to agree. The look of relief on his face is genuine, and his shoulders sag a little as he leans back against the paint-blistered wood behind us. Thank you. I really appreciate it. That, of course, leaves me in your debt, Lainey. If you ever need anything and I can help, just call me. I mean it. Sometimes it's the little things that get blown up out of proportion, and reputations can be damaged. Kathy doesn't deserve that. But I owe you big time, and I'll make it up to you when an opportunity presents itself. He offers me his hand, and we shake on it. As a journalist, it's useful to make friends and not enemies, and you never know when it might come in handy to be able to call in a favour. You're a lifesaver. Thank you, he adds. As our eyes meet, something deep inside of me stirs. Oh no. Not this, not now. Why is it that the best ones are always taken? Hey, Mum. How are you doing? I'm fine, Lainey. How are you? It is good to hear her voice, and I feel bad that I've left it so long to call. Mum has always said that I know where she is if I need anything, but that she won't interfere in my life. I was 21 when my parents' divorce was finalised, and I guess I did take my dad's side. I felt it was a travesty the way he was treated, and I was shocked when Mum said she'd had enough. It was as if she was abandoning him when he needed her the most. Now, 5 years on, I'm older and a little wiser. I can at least understand why she did what she did. Whether I agree with that, well, I'm still not sure, but it doesn't mean I love her any less, only that I'm sad that it all went wrong because they were so good together. Busy as usual, but happy enough, I reply. And how's it been, settling into the new job and the new flat? I ease myself back into the corner of the sofa and idly gaze around. The job's great. The flat not so great. Unfortunately, I soon discovered that I have a noisy neighbour upstairs. I like the place, though. It's small but immaculate, as it's not long been refurbished. There's an awkward silence as we both cast around for something to say. I owe her an apology, and it might help to break the ice. I've been meaning to ring you for a while now, but it's been hard juggling everything. I am sorry, as I think of you often. How are things at Le Cuisinier de Campagne? She gives a little laugh, and I can hear the contentment in her voice. It's fun. The country cooking courses are really beginning to take off, and I need to think long and hard about next year. If I offer more places and more dates, I'll have to consider employing someone to help on a permanent basis. For now, I manage with a few helpers who come in as and when I need them. I'm finding that quite a few of my guests are rebooking for next year already, which is great. The main thing is that everything is ticking over quite nicely, and life is sweet. That sums up my mum. Who uses the word sweet these days unless it's connected to something full of sugar? Grandma was a hippie in her teens, and she always had a laid-back bohemian mindset. And of course that rubbed off on Mum. Gran was unconventional, it's true, but she always impressed upon me that it was important to question things in life rather than live by other people's rules. Ironically, that turned out to be the deal-breaker in my parents' marriage. Dad had ambitions, but Mum simply wanted a quiet life. Well, I guess they both ended up getting what they wanted, in a strange sort of way. That's wonderful to hear. I do miss your cooking, I reply, feeling wistful. For 10 years, Mum ran a little cafe attached to our local garden centre. In the school holidays, I'd go along and help out. Every morning we'd bake huge trays of cupcakes, scones and savoury tarts. She was happy there until they decided not to renew her lease. She was a victim of her own success, having turned it into a very profitable little business. They didn't bake on site after Mum left, and everything was delivered by van each morning. After that, Mum decided to turn a part of our large back garden into a little allotment, and it wasn't long before she added a greenhouse. Fresh fruit and veg was always on hand, and something that I took for granted in those days. I'm still keeping it simple, she says, and I imagine the smile she has on her face right now. It works for me. And are you looking after yourself? Hand on heart, I can't say I always get my 5 a day, but I do look for the organic options whenever I can. In between the takeaways, you mean? I try not to laugh out loud. It's hard cooking for one. The moment I stopped speaking, I could kick myself. I know what's coming next. No, it's not. It's just a case of bothering, Lainey. It matters what you put into your body, and you're worth the effort. I cooked all the time when my childhood sweetheart, Warren, and I eventually moved in together. We called it quits after 2 disastrous years, and our split coincided with Dad's troubles, which made for a terrible time. No wonder Mum fled to France, just to save her sanity. She begged me to go with her, but we both knew it wasn't the right decision for me. It was rural and much too quiet. I know, but what I really need is to find myself a man who can cook me interesting little meals, while I slave over the keyboard writing up articles extolling the flavours of the exciting food I get to taste when I'm working. Mum sighs, and it's a reminder that even though we are miles apart, she still worries about me. You don't need a man for that when God gave you 2 perfectly good hands and a brain. The internet is littered with healthy recipes that take less than half an hour to prepare and cook, so there's no excuse. Now I've said my piece, you can relax. Except that I'm going to ask how your dad is doing. Still writing? He's on book number 6 now, I reply, not sure if Mum is aware of that fact. That's impressive. It's been, 4 years since he first sat down to write? Gosh, that time has flown by, hasn't it? He seems happy enough these days. I often wonder whether he gets lonely, though. Working from home isn't as sociable as going to the office, is it? Was that a tactless thing to say? But Mum is probably way past caring what he gets up to. Your dad will find it hard to forgive those who shied away when he needed support. It's time he moved on, though, and made new friends. That's easy for Mum to say, but I won't point out the obvious, that being self-employed and working from home has turned him from a social animal into a bit of a hermit. He's not hiding, as he did in the early days, but he enjoys his solitude, and that's a personal choice only he can make. Maybe. He's busy, though. Have you read any of his books? No, but let me know if he changes genre, as I only read happy, uplifting stories. I'd watch the news if I wanted to read about murder, mystery and conspiracy. There are more good people on this earth than bad ones, but if all people's spread is the negative stuff, this world is never going to heal itself. Mum's solution to avoiding anything negative is to go back to basics and lead by example. Growing your own and cooking with fresh ingredients rather than buying ready-made meals is a healthier option. She believes that teaching the kids to get hands-on is important, and she does just that on her little plot in France. And how are the petits jardiniers doing? I ask. Oh, it's no longer the little gardeners' club. Many of the homes around here grow their own produce anyway, and so things have moved on. A group of local children and parents come along once a month on a Saturday morning, and they bring something that is homegrown. Sometimes it's fresh produce, even fish, as one of the families have a lake, and in winter it's often fruit from the orchards that has been stored in trays covered with straw. The sessions have turned into a community get-together, and it's so much fun. You sound really happy, Mum. The truth is that since she left, Mum has never shared her problems with me. I wish she would let down her guard and talk openly as we did in the old days. The longer we go between contact, though, the harder it is to talk about anything really meaningful. I am Lainey. This is where I was meant to be. But that's not to say I don't have regrets. It's not quite how I thought my life would turn out. And I miss you, lovely. I know, Mum. I miss you too. And I will take time out to finally come and visit this summer, I promise. That would be marvellous, Lainey. I think you'll love it here. I end the call, as always, with mixed feelings. Uplifted because we've talked, and sad because our lives are so far apart in so many ways. November. Chapter 3. Friends in Need. You were right, Lainey. Thomas, the managing editor of upscale dining magazine, scans round to take in the buzzing atmosphere at Aleatory. It is impressive, and my wife is extremely cross with me because we couldn't get a reservation until the second week in May. We chink champagne flutes, and I give him a sympathetic nod. Well, considering they'll be celebrating their second anniversary around that time, I'm sure the menu will be extra special. Even I'm surprised to have been on the exclusive invite list for tonight's Christmas taster party. When I opened the innocuous-looking envelope and pulled out the elegant invitation card, a little thrill coursed through my veins. It was addressed to me personally, and a +1, as if it were an invite for a wedding. There was no way of knowing whether Rick was behind the invitation or whether I was on the invite list given that I'd interviewed him back in January. But looking at the other attendees here tonight, there are a lot of famous names. It's great PR, and the exclusivity of the party helps to keep the hype going. Thomas was delighted when I flashed the invitation under his nose. I didn't ask him just because he's the boss. The truth is, I would have struggled to find a suitable escort anyway. My second option was Ant, but given that he and his wife are struggling to cope with a 5-month-old baby who prefers to sleep all day and stay awake at night, he may well have turned me down. Suddenly, a smiley face appears in front of me, and I see it's Neil, the waiter I took for coffee and a confidential chat the day after I interviewed Rick. Ever the professional, only the tiniest lift of his left eyebrow as we look directly at each other serves as an acknowledgement. He extends the platter he's balancing on his upturned hand towards me, turning to include Thomas as he talks us through the selection of canapés. Here we have chef's hot picks, winter sausage with sage mash in a berry and port jus, then a seared scallop in a rock samphire and cream sauce, and a winter root vegetable stack. Thomas and I lean forward, inspecting the ceramic tasting spoons, and my stomach immediately begins to grumble. Thomas indicates for me to dive in first, and I go for the scallop, while he chooses the sausage and mash. I'm in gastro heaven, as the velvety creaminess of the sauce, the saltiness of the samphire, and the tenderness of the scallop combine into one as I swallow. Neil looks on, patiently waiting until we've finished. Another waiter appears behind him, holding out a stainless steel basket for the empty spoons. Neil swoops in with a platter once again. I'm sure he's supposed to be circulating, but Thomas is eagerly looking on and isn't about to say no, and neither am I. This time, I go for the vegetable stack. The presentation is unbelievable, as the little dishes hold no more than a single bite of food. This stack must have at least 4 very finely sliced vegetables, interlaced with puff pastry. As I pop it into my mouth and bite, there's a hint of sauce between each layer. My mouth tingles with the flavour of a tart balsamic vinegar, and then a sweet lift of honey. Thomas is already placing his second empty spoon into the basket, looking extremely impressed by the scallop. Wonderful. The samphire gives it a salty kick, and the scallop is cooked to perfection. That is precisely the response we love to hear. Rick's voice filters over by my right shoulder, and I turn to see him standing behind me. As he joins us, and I turn back around, I notice that Neil has already discreetly moved on, much to Thomas's disappointment. Hi, Rick. What a great party. Let me introduce you to Thomas Morrison Wynne, Upscale Dining's managing editor. He was just saying how envious his wife is that he's here tonight and they couldn't get a reservation until May. Thomas offers his hand and they shake. Yes, I'm in deep trouble now as her birthday is in January, so it will have to be a belated celebratory meal, Thomas says with a broad smile. Anyway, may I congratulate you on what has been a phenomenal success story. Thank you, Thomas. And I'm sorry about the long wait, but it's been crazily busy, virtually since day one. I can't believe we'll soon begin making plans for a party to mark our 2nd anniversary. I'll make sure you are both on the list, and that way you can bring your wife with you to the party to hopefully make up for her disappointment. A happy wife means a happy life, as they say, Thomas retorts with a grin. Much appreciated, Rick. And what a wonderful way to introduce your Christmas menu, with a tasting party. Rick and I exchange a conspiratorial look, and I can see Thomas notices, although he says nothing. I'd dearly love to stay and chat, but I've been ordered to speak to everyone at least once. I'll give you a call around 11 tomorrow morning, Lainey. It's good to finally meet you in person, Thomas. Kathy and I are most grateful to Upscale Dining for its ongoing support. We had some great feedback from Lainey's feature. She has quite a following. As Rick heads off to continue mingling, Thomas glances at me, unable to contain his curiosity. Ongoing support? You didn't think I was going to waste an opportunity, did you? Thomas stares at me, narrowing his eyes for a second or two before breaking out into a broad smile. Naturally, when the invitation arrived, I immediately called Rick to thank him and asked if there was any chance of a few pre-party photographs of the food. Ant popped in for an hour earlier on, but left shortly before we arrived. Thomas raises an eyebrow, and I shrug my shoulders. I thought I'd put something together for the website under the Food in the News feature, and Rick suggested a quick video call, so clearly he has something coming up he thinks might be of particular interest to us. Ah, marvellous idea. Thanks for jumping on it, Lainey. While Rick's in the spotlight, it would be great if we could get another exclusive at some point. Suddenly behind us, there's a massive influx of people spilling in through the door, and all heads turn. Kathy has just arrived with a group of friends in tow, and they're in party mode. Immediately, the vibe in the restaurant changes, and it's like an electric charge surging through the room. Most of the faces are instantly recognizable by the majority of us, as we all